So yeah, it has ties to Venezuela. Big Oil gave Trump $250 million roughly to well, I don't want to say to invade in Venezuela, but they gave him $250 million and he invaded Venezuela, and they're massively profiting off Venezuelan oil right now. So it kind of makes you think, you know. I can't say it's a direct cause and effect, but there's definitely some correlation there, you know. And the truth is whenever you give someone $250 million, they're gonna do whatever you want, for the most part. I always hear an argument that Trump is a billionaire or whatever, so he's not gonna. First of all, in his first term in his campaign, he's like, "I'm not gonna take any money from anyone. No one owns me," And this second term, I mean, he's taken money from a lot of people, and we're gonna get into that. Most notably, APAC, big oil, and big tech, right? So for starters, big tech. So people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, people like that. There. So Donald Trump. Let me get my camera out of the way. Let's put it over here. Okay. Donald Trump has received significant funding from tech leaders, notably over $290 million from Elon Musk alone for the 2024 cycle, plus substantial donations to his inauguration from companies like Meta, Google, and Amazon, with individual tech figures like Tim Cook, who is the CEO of Apple, also contributing, though specific total amounts taken from all tech bros vary by source. Also, what's really important here is you see Sam Altman, OpenAI, donated $1 million, which isn't that much, right? You don't think it's that much. Obviously, Elon Musk is $290 million, which is just crazy, and they had a falling out, whatever, but he is still benefiting from government ties. Meta paid $25 million. Oh wow, this is in settlements related to Trump's account suspensions. Regardless, all of these tech people want him in office, and you have to wonder, why is that? Also, obviously, of course, it's going to be at the bottom of the list, but other tech figures, significant donations came from individuals like Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, and crypto figures. And these people are AI, like Sam Altman, OpenAI, Peter Thiel founded Palantir. Elon Musk was a part of that too, and the whole point of Elon Musk and Trump being together and all that during his campaign was like, and they giving him all this money, is the AI infrastructure. So we're working towards a AI surveillance state. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's what's happening. It's going to come to the point where you have a massive crisis, like even for example, Minnesota, right? Lady gets shot, massive outrage. If there was violence and martial law had to be declared, next thing you know, there's an AI surveillance state. I feel like they're baiting that. They really want that to happen. Also, if they just decide that the ICE hasn't been able to deport enough, it's not working. Well, hey, let's get this AI surveillance in here so we can get all these illegals out, right? So that's the plan, So tech in this day and age, if big tech is giving that much money to someone, it's concerning. Also, big oil. So there was a meeting. It was like an hour and a half long, but today, live streamed, President Trump participates in a meeting with oil and gas executives. We'll see if we can get into that. It's really long though, but I do want to watch this video, and it's that oil and gas industry spent $250 million on elections that produced the current U.S. government, right? So let's check that. It's by Forbes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is my colleague, Forbes staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for bringing me back to once again talk about campaign contributions.
Of course, and exactly how they connect to what we saw in Venezuela, that operation conducted by U.S. forces that resulted in the capture of the country's sitting leader, Nicolas Maduro. He's currently in New York City, where he faces narco terrorism, drug, and weapons charges. President Trump said the goal of that operation, though, was to bring, quote, outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. But some have been quick to criticize him for that, saying that the motivation doesn't really seem like it's about drugs, but rather oil, especially given that President Trump said after the raid that the United States is going to be heavily involved in Venezuela's oil industry. After the story broke, you're reporting this. The oil and gas industry spent $250 million on elections that produced the current U.S. government. I want to talk exactly where that money was spent, though. Let's first talk party. Did the oil and gas industry pour more money into Republicans or Democrats?
I almost returned this thing. Thought there's no way a $79 device beats central heating. Then I saw my note.
Oh yeah, the oil and gas industry certainly had a favorite, and that would be Republicans. This data is all from Open Secrets. According to their calculations, Republican candidates got 88% of the industry's support.
That's huge. Is there any indication to why? Tell us about that.
I reached out to all of the oil and gas companies that we looked at in this article. I didn't get any answers that would have explained that at all. In some cases, maybe it makes sense that the lawmakers are in states that are really driven, economies driven by oil. So, for example, Ted Cruz was the biggest recipient in Congress with over $1 million. He's also from Texas, so it's not that surprising that they would want to give money to somebody in that state. But, I was surprised to see that it was an 88 to 12% split. Did seem a little bit egregious.
I mean, that's just huge. So then when you're looking at the top of the ticket back in 2024, obviously it was Trump versus Harris. President Trump, obviously the Republican nominee. I'm assuming based on that math, he received a lot more of that spending. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, so he received about $2.6 million, whereas Biden and then Harris received.
Okay, so this is a video describing oil and gas. That's why it says elections. So people like Ted Cruz, the neocon, the establishment, conservatives, and the Trump administration have all taken lots of money from big oil. So unfortunately, I don't like the way they're yapping. It's not the best. I'm a little disappointed, but we're gonna keep. And this guy just looks tired, dude. Looks like he's just had enough. Like when he got on, he was like, "Yep, thanks for having me on again to once again discuss campaign contributions." Like he's just not a happy camper, it seems. But let's see what he has to say.
$1.4 million. So again, pretty sizable difference there. Not a ton of money in the overall picture of things. If you factor in Elon Musk, spent $250 million. Tim Allen spent hundreds of millions. They're different. They're 2.6 to 1.4 isn't going to make a huge difference in an election, but it does kind of show you who they support.
And when you're moving down the ballot, I know you mentioned Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. He got a lot of support from the oil and gas industry. But how much was spent on congressional races? And who were some of the other candidates that benefited the most?
Well, the top 9 beneficiaries in congressional races were all Republicans. And what I also found interesting, whereas Cruz, Texas makes sense, his counterpart in the Senate from Texas, John Cornyn, was not amongst those top 9 people. So, you have 2 from Louisiana, Mike Johnson, not surprising given that he's now speaker, North Dakota, Wyoming. You've got some fracking states there as well that were well represented. First Democrat on the list comes in as Colin Alred, who is also Texas.
And then when you're looking at this and comparing this spending from 2024 to 2020, how exactly does that compare?
It was a 66% increase from 2020. So, we didn't look at 2022 since that was an off-year election for the president. Obviously, they're going to spend more money when there is a presidential election.
One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is how important the smaller elections are. Most people will just vote every 4 years, right? Because they think that the president is who's going to change their life. When at least nowadays the president does have a lot more power than he should. Back in the day, the president did not really it didn't really matter who the president was. He's just the face, pretty much. He still had power, but not nearly as much. The power came from the Senate and Congress. They make the laws, they vote on them, and what really matters is who you vote for in terms of your representatives or your Senate. So in Texas we have Ted Cruz, which I would be really surprised if he won again after all the stuff that's come out. But regardless, that's who we have right now. He's taken $1 million from big oil, right? Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. I'm not at least $1 million, pretty sure he said. So the most powerful neocon Republicans, Mike Johnson's an avid supporter of Trump, so is Ted Cruz. So these people, they're whenever we have those types of people in office, they will allow what Trump's doing to happen. Where if we had a house full of Thomas Masseys, this would never be happening, because the problem is if you corrupt the Senate in the Congress, it doesn't even matter check this out. If you corrupt the Senate and the House of Representatives, if you corrupt the legislative branch, it doesn't matter if the president is good or bad. But if you corrupt the president, the legislative branch still matters. So a corrupt president can be stopped by the legislative branch. But a corrupt legislative branch can't really be stopped by the president without some major crisis or war or so what we really need to focus on as Americans is our local representatives, the House of Representatives, Senate, just people that aren't running for president, but they're still running, and they have power. And the thing is you need to have a majority, right? So pay attention, vote for those people that care about what you care about, and track the money. Where are they getting their campaign money from? Who are they answering to? Because you have to rub the backs of the people that rub yours, right? So Trump's had his back rubbed a lot by the pro-Israel lobby, so he's going to be very pro-Israel. He's had his back rubbed a lot by oil. He's going to be pro whatever the oil companies want him to do. He's had his back rubbed by big tech. He's going to be very pro-big tech, and his administration has shown that. He is very adamant about, he says it's a good thing, but when you track the money, you realize it's really not his choice. Obviously he could betray them, but that would be what it was. It would be betrayal. It would be, you gave me this money and I'm still not, you know what I mean? That's the way it works. You got to rub backs. So we need to pay attention to that. Trump is bought and sold. And so is Mike Johnson. So is Ted Cruz. So is everyone else that was listed. So this is just a call to pay attention to who your local representatives are.
But it was, it seemed like a pretty decent jump there of 66%.
I want to read another tidbit from your reporting. This is what you wrote. Separately, the industry spent an additional $154 million on federal lobbying for roughly 200 clients in 2023 and 2024. Now, as we sit here in 2026, do you think, or do these companies think, does the oil industry think that this investment paid off for them?
I would imagine they think it's a good investment. Oil companies are in the business of making money, and they wouldn't drop $154 million on something if they didn't think it was going to be worthwhile. As for whether they still think that's the case, I don't have tallies in front of me, but I can tell you that oil and gas companies have not stopped lobbying after that. So, they certainly view that as the cost of doing business.
If you have any questions, drop it in the chat, and I'm watching the chat. I'll answer any questions you have. If you have anything you want me to react to, let me know. Yeah.
As do many other industries.
And did this money appear to influence at all the administration's actions when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Maduro's ouster, or President Trump's interest in getting the United States really heavily involved in rebuilding Venezuela's oil industry?
That's it. We don't know. It's not clear.
So they phrase it as they're rebuilding Venezuela's oil industry, but actually Venezuela's oil industry was just fine. They were just separate. They were sitting on their oil, but it's their oil. They have the right to sit on it, and they're against central banking. Also, okay, I should have brought this up earlier, but that's another update. Machado, who we talked about in my Venezuelan stream, turns out she's gone to Tel Aviv. She's kissed the wall. She's very she actually she wanted she made a video and called Netanyahu to like invade Venezuela or very soon we'll be allies, or so if she's the next president, then I think the plan is very clear for what's happening. One second, sorry.
If it mattered to what extent, whether any of this, and that's part of the issue with money in politics. You can't say definitively if the money is what drove a decision. A lot of the time, sometimes it can be a little bit clear cut, and those are wonderful examples if you're a reporter and you're able to find those. But a lot of times it's just you see the money and then you see an action later, and connecting them is definitive. One led to the other.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was saying. It can't be a direct cause and effect, but you have to look at the facts. So here's the facts. The Trump administration has taken about $250 million, 290 from big tech, and then around the same amount from big oil and around the same amount from Israel, right? So we're looking at close to $1 billion. So he's going to be loyal to those things. And then you see that we invaded Venezuela and we're taking their oil. So yeah, so like you said, it's not, you can't directly connect the dots, but this is something that happened and this is something that happened. You can decide for yourself if they're related. I think it's very obvious that they're related, So it can't be determined immediately as treason, but you as us as the people, we should know, hey, this is fishy. At the very least, you should think this is fishy.
Not quite sure.
I mean, there's always a question, or there's always that statement, rather, money talks. Does it appear, though, I know you can't link it from definitive, but does it appear that money nudged anything in the direction here?
Good question.
Donald Trump likes money. And people who, are donating to his campaign and his affiliated committees and are spending money at Trump properties and buying his meme coin and buying his token and buying his stable coin and buying his beer pong set that you can see behind me are often doing it, not in my case, because they want to curry favor with Donald Trump. So, whether that actually does work or not, I don't think it was...
Dude, look at his liquor stockpile. Damn, son. Y'all see this? Y'all see that? Bottles on bottles. Think he's drunk? Do you think he was drunk for this interview? He doesn't sound drunk, but that's crazy. That's a lot. Damn. Unrelated, sorry, but I just noticed that. Wow.
The fact that he did attack Venezuela doesn't sound like it's totally out of left field given what his platform has been over the past year.
And ever since that attack, that operation, there have been comparisons to Iraq. And President Trump, he apparently spoke to MSNBC's Joe Scarborough, and he said that the difference here is America is going to be keeping the oil. Bush didn't. We're keeping the oil. President Trump has not been shy about talking about oil and the United States' involvement in the oil.
Also, the ships, too. He said, we're keeping the oil and we're keeping the ships. So I guess we took Venezuelan ships, too. I'm not 100% educated on that fact, but that is a direct quote from Trump.
He said this: we're going to be rebuilding and we're not spending money. The oil companies are spending money. As of now, there's only one American oil company operating in Venezuela. Remains to be seen if others are going to go back in.
Name the company. I'm pretty sure it's Chevron, right? I'm pretty sure Chevron is operating. Is Chevron operating? Oh, there it is, in Venezuela. Yeah, so they're the only one, and I don't think she's doing her due diligence. She should have said that.
U.S. oil giants chomping at the bit right now to return to Venezuela. What's your take on that?
They're a little nervous. They don't know exactly how it's going to play out. Obviously, companies do not want to irritate Donald Trump, but and they want to make money. But on the other hand, is this going to be a good play for them in the long term? Sure, maybe they'll get into Venezuela and they'll get some oil now. But I've heard that some of them are concerned about investing a lot of money there. And all of a sudden we have, different president in the United States and their investment just goes up. So, when I talked to ConocoPhillips spokesperson, he said they're, still evaluating, waiting to hear in not jumping in anything yet.
Is every person
Damn
who works at a
ads.
desk doomed to get a neck hump? Not if you do this thing.
I've talked to politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, since Maduro was captured and brought to the United States, and the reaction has been really mixed. Some have been excited that he's now out of power, others concerned about exactly what's next. I'm curious, how exactly did the oil and gas stocks react to this news?
They viewed it as good news, at least on that first day where we saw Chevron, which is, as you mentioned, the only major U.S. company currently permitted to pump and export oil there, was up 5%. ExxonMobil 2.2, which brought it to a 52-week high. ConocoPhillips also went up, and it also was oil, not just oil companies, but oil field service companies also did really well. SLB was up 8.9%. Halliburton was about 8%. So the market certainly thinks this is good for them.
And obviously, this story, you're looking at the money aspect here, the money angle. What exactly are you looking out for next? What money trail are you going to be following?
Two things. One of which I mentioned in the article itself is we will see around January 31st when campaigns have to report their latest financials to the FEC. We'll see who might have given money in the run-up to Venezuela. These stats are all from previous, so it'll be interesting to see what happened right before that. The other thing, which I didn't mention in here, but we've talked about it previously, stock. I am very interested to see which lawmakers traded stocks that might be influenced by the actions in Venezuela. They have 45 days to report that information. A lot of times they do it earlier, a lot of times they do it later. So it's going to be interesting to see what's coming in there and if anybody was trading defense industry stocks or oil and gas stocks.
So I think that sounds like you and I probably have plenty of conversations in store for us in 2026. Zach,
Okay. So one thing that he brought up was the stocks, and I wonder, whoever knew about the operation, did any politicians invest in Chevron? I don't know if I'll get an answer, but let's see. Did any politicians invest in Chevron before Venezuela invasion? Insider trading. Okay, so linking that would be complex is what it says, but senators like Jerry Moran and Pete Ricketts have held significant investments. Okay, I'm talking about, did anybody buy any right before then, I don't know if it's going to give me the answer. No direct link, just overlap. Okay, yeah, so it's weird because they can show Nancy Pelosi's insider trading, and there's a whole app that you can literally track her trading and do exactly what she does, but we can't get this. Regardless, so yeah, that's that. This next video is how oil and tech giants bought Trump. Unfortunately, it's this weird vertical, but it's only a couple minutes long, so let's see what they have to say.
Trump and Trump allies have historically been anti-tech.
I think big tech has made a terrible mistake and very, very bad for our country.
What changed? How did we go from this
I'm filing a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter.
to this?
This is definitely a high IQ group. They're leading a revolution in business and in genius.
Well, we can't say for sure, but I'm guessing all of these donations didn't hurt. And the switch up on big tech, it's just...
So actually, yeah, it may be vertical, but this is some very informative stuff here. Trump first term versus Trump second term, it's like the craziest change you've ever seen. Pretty much all around he switched up. I was young, so I can't say for sure, but from what I've heard and what I saw when I was young and the facts that I do know, Trump first term actually wasn't too bad. The economy was doing pretty hot or pretty good, and he wasn't bought by anyone. And he literally, that was one of his big promises. And he fulfilled most, not all, but some, at least he fulfilled some of his promises. This term, he hasn't fulfilled any, right? He's completely gone against his word. And this is one of those examples here. The switch up on big tech.
scratching the surface. What you're looking at now is the biggest inaugural fund in the history of the United States. Because there are almost no rules regulating inauguration funds, no laws saying what the funds have to be spent on, no limits on how much can be donated or who can even donate. And as a result, inauguration funds have become a major tool for corporate interests to buy influence in our government. So of course, big tech companies weren't the only ones throwing their hats in the ring. Next up, Big Oil, ConocoPhillips, and Chevron. On the first day of the new administration, Trump signed an order to expand drilling on federal land in Alaska. Then they passed the...
Speaking of Alaska, guys, I don't know if you've heard, and we might do a whole stream about this in the future. They're destroying forests in Alaska. They're shooting bears, like, doesn't matter. They're just not counting, just shooting any bears they see. Alaska's the last great frontier. Alaska's the last place you can go and truly be alone in the wild, you know, live off the land. And it's tough too. It's Alaskan wilderness, you know, they make shows about this, Alaskan bush people and stuff, but it's being ruined. And the Trump administration is, maybe it's not a direct cause, but he's approving of it. He thinks it's a good thing. It's one thing to drill for oil in Alaska. You know, it's been around for a long time. That doesn't have to destroy everything. But whenever you're cutting down the forests and killing all the bears and just not caring for wildlife at all, it's getting bad, guys. And if we don't, you know, protect our forests, it's very simple. If we don't do something about this, then Alaska will no longer be the last frontier. There will be no frontier. It's going to be all civilized. And, you know, it's good to have civilized areas, but it's also good to have wild areas. It's very important to have trees for oxygen and just to leave things the way God made them, you know? Even if you don't believe in God, I think nature is something we can all agree that is really important, you know? And this is something that is also kind of being thrown to the side. You don't see this on the major news because you have people getting shot by ICE agents and you have, you know, we're invading Venezuela and stuff, but this is also really important. Alaska's being destroyed. And, you know, we'll get into it. I promise we will get into it eventually, but let's continue with this.
One big, beautiful bill.
Oops. There we go.
Which had $18 billion in tax breaks and incentives for big oil. Then in July...
And the big, beautiful bill, to be honest, I don't know too much about it, but what I do know is it was supposed to be this saving grace for, you know, for the working man. It's good for us. And it turns out, like, taxing the rich, and turns out that the only people who got taxed were us. And the rich did not get taxed. You know, probably because the rich bought Trump. Probably because big oil and big tech, and also, I mean, AIPAC's not related in this one, so we won't talk about that. But specifically, big oil and big tech bought him. They're the rich ones, so he's not going to tax them because he's owned by them, right? So the big, beautiful bill was a scam. It was supposed to help us. It didn't help us at all. It actually hurt us. And once again, that just kind of gets shoved under the rug because there's so much bullshit happening that, like, it's hard to stay focused on one thing. And we got to stay sober-minded and vigilant and focus. And, like, all of this has happened in a year, you know, not like a year, not even, or maybe just now a year, right? It's January, almost Inauguration Day. Just now a year. And this is enough to, like, cover a lifetime. not a lifetime, but, like, decades. There's so much shit has happened, you know? And it just keeps more and more and more just shoved down our faces, and so we're not really paying attention. A lot of people are becoming desensitized. All these memes you see are just desensitizing you, you know? I mean, the Charlie Kirk memes are a good example. And I'm not even talking about people that were celebrating his death. I'm just talking about just crazy AI slop memes that just completely desensitize you to the fact that a man lost his life on national television, you know? And I haven't seen it yet with the lady, probably because most memes are made by, like, leftists, I guess, but we're still desensitized because of so much stuff that's going on. So, and honestly, that's why I said earlier, I went to the gym. I feel so much better today. Yesterday, I was honestly losing it. I was kind of, I hate to say that, you know, I was depressed, but I was really feeling down in the dumps. I still did the stream because it's important to get the news, but going to the gym today and just, you know, also getting off the phone for a while, you know, I picked up a book. I read a few pages. I worked out. I feel much better, you know. I feel alive. You know, like that's what we all need. We all, and nature too. I spent some time out in nature. I got some sun, you know, some vitamin D. We all need that if we're gonna do anything. Because if we just continue to be on our phones and just, you know, goy slopping and just I'm at a loss for words. Just, you know, just not doing what we're supposed to do, not following the laws of human nature, then we're going to continue to be desensitized, and we're going to continue to just let all this happen. You know what I mean? But if we're all awake and aware, I think it would be a lot harder for them to slip all this stuff by us. And because, you know, it's like, if you're always, and I have a problem with this, I'm always on the phone seeing everything that's happened, you know, seeing like just the world news, you know, because I want to do this. But there needs to be a break. There needs to be some, like, you need to take time away from the phone, away from the screens, go get some sunlight, like spend 30 minutes in silence, you know what I mean? And like meditate, pray, whatever it is you do. Ground yourself. You have to ground yourself. That's how we stop them from slipping this stuff by us. That's how we overcome. Let's continue this video.
First their own ban and decided that Chevron should definitely be allowed to operate in Venezuela. And I'm sure the $2 million donation had nothing to do with it. Nvidia got in on the action with $1 million donation. And what did they get? Permission. The government had previously banned Nvidia from selling their most advanced AI chips to China on the grounds that China would be using them for the military. Not the case anymore. AI chips can be sold to China again, although Nvidia does have to share 15% of the revenue with the US government. Just like with Apple, tariffs seem to only apply to people who lack direct access to the president. Boeing made a contribution after having a very bad couple of years. You might remember a few years ago, their planes were literally falling out of the sky. Hundreds of people died. Seems like the kind of thing that there might be a trial over. But in May, the Department of Justice made a deal with Boeing to not prosecute them for crimes over the 737 crashes, as long as Boeing paid about $1.1 billion in fines.
Money talks, bullshit walks. That's crazy. I totally forgot about Boeing. Their planes literally were falling out of the sky, and then nothing ever happened, and I guess that's because, yeah, that was the deal. They just fork over some money and you're all good. That is crazy. See, that's another thing that, you know, you just totally forget about. All this shit has happened.
Sounds like a lot of money until you learn that Boeing had just won a contract for $50 billion
Jesus!
with the Department of Defense to build...
Is my Lord and Savior. Guys, it gets worse. Oh my gosh. So yeah, $1 billion seems like a lot of money. It's like, maybe that's a reasonable fine, but they just got a Pentagon deal, so they just got paid $50 billion by the government, so they can just give $1 billion back, no big deal, and everything's fine. That's corruption. That's textbook corruption.
New F-47 fighter jets. And maybe the worst part of all of these donors are the ones that we don't know anything about. The shell companies, political action committees, and the fake nonprofits that were made to hide who the real donors are. Americans for Pharma Reform, Election Freedom Inc., Axe Capital. All untraceable dark money. We'll probably never know.
Yeah, that's another thing. Everything we see, it's 1%. You know? And it's kind of crazy because 1% is enough to realize, like, these are all pedophiles and they hate us, and, you know, but that's just 1%, you know, and we have to see it from that lens, that there's much more going on in the shadows. And, you know, the Epstein files too, that's a good example. They released less than 1% of the files, heavily redacted, and we still found that, you know, Trump is doing things to kids. I mean, and not just Trump, but other people too, you know, and you can choose to believe that, you know, so people unredacted the files by copy and pasting text. And it's kind of funny how the FBI like did a special redaction project and really like worked overtime, and all people had to do was copy and paste. And, you know, I seen it done, but I saw it like live, you know, so I tend to believe what happened. Less than 1%. Imagine the vile, awful things in those files from both left and right that they're not wanting us to see. And we probably never will see.
Who they were or what influence they bought. To me, this looks a lot like a system of patronage. A government that operates on fealty, bribes, personal favors, and insider access. The inaugural fund was just one move in the playbook, a move that recenters corporate power at your expense.
Okay. And then we have this one. Big oil. I think we all get the point, though. I'm not going to lie. No offense to this guy. He probably did a great job. I think we all get the point. I think we're going to move on.